At our family meeting, my mom stabbed the air with her finger and said, "Learn from your sister, she sends us $4,000 every month." You ungrateful son. My throat locked up, but I still tried, Mom. That's actually me. My father slammed his palm on the table. Don't you dare steal your sister's accomplishments. If you're so confident, then stop the payments next month. My sister just sat there quiet, almost relieved, like the lie was finally doing its job. So I did it. I stopped. And the next month I found out exactly what my money had been buying, and why they needed me silent more than they needed me loved. My name is Zephyr Maddox. I'm not here to play the victim, I'm here because I carried this alone for too long, and I don't think anyone should have to. Before I tell you everything, can you just drop a quick hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from? Sometimes knowing one real person is listening makes the shame feel lighter. And if you want more real stories like this, raw, messy, and honest, please subscribe. It helps me keep telling the truth when it's hardest. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. At that family meeting, my mother sat perched on the edge of her favorite armchair, the one she never let anyone else use, and spat out the words like she had practiced them in front of a mirror. Learn from your sister who sends us $4,000 every month, you ungrateful son. I didn't even flinch. I just looked her in the eye and started to say, "But that's actually me," before my father slammed his hand on the arm of his chair, eyes blazing. Don't try to steal your sister's accomplishments, then try stopping the payments. That sentence, it didn't leave a bruise, it left a crater, and I think they knew exactly what they were doing. My name is Zephyr Maddox. I'm 30, live in Aurora, Colorado, and work long shifts at a food processing facility just outside the city. I've been on my own since I was 20, but I never stopped trying to earn their approval. Every birthday, every holiday, I sent money. I didn't have much, just my paycheck, a crummy apartment near the train tracks, and my grandfather's old pocket watch, the only thing in that house that ever felt like it really belonged to me. I flew back home to Asheville, North Carolina, because my mother had called me 3 times in a single morning with that tight, clipped tone she saves for disappointment and discipline. We need to talk. It's serious. That's code in our family. Code for bring your armor. I stepped back into the same house I grew up in, and nothing had changed. The air still smelled faintly of lavender and judgment. Family photos lined the hallway like reminders of a play I was never cast in. My sister Sloane always took center stage in every frame, every story. I was just background. We sat in the living room for what they called a family talk, which always felt more like a trial. My mother led with disappointment. My father let her go on just long enough to set the tone, then delivered the first blow. You think 50 cents is funny? He held up a printed screenshot of a transaction. My name. A transfer of $0.50. I stared at it like it was some kind of joke. He didn't laugh. Neither did she. You think this is cute? My father continued, his voice climbing. Your sister Rain sends $4,000 a month. 4,000. And you send us this. What kind of man are you? I blinked. Rain. That was the name I'd been using. Or rather, the name Sloane had suggested I use when she first floated the idea of us giving back to our parents. Make it a surprise, she said. Don't use your real name. Let's keep it anonymous, like from an angel. She even came up with the nickname Rain. Rainbow, you know, something light and good. I went along with it. I wanted to believe it was meaningful. Now my parents were staring at me like I was the joke. I opened my mouth to correct them. But my father cut me off with a raised voice that felt rehearsed. Don't you dare try to take credit for your sister's sacrifice. That money came from her. You think we're stupid? I looked at Sloane. She sat there calm and beautiful as always, with that look of calculated innocence that had served her well all her life. She didn't say a word. Not one. Not, that's not true. Not. It was his idea, not even a look of guilt. Nothing. That silence. That silence gutted me. I stopped trying. There was no point. The whole meeting was a performance, and I was just the fall guy. My dad leaned forward for the final line. If you think you're so clever, stop sending money next month. Let's see what happens. Later upstairs in the guest room that used to be my bedroom, now stripped of any trace I'd ever lived there, I opened my suitcase and ran my fingers over the old pocket watch from my grandfather. Etched inside it still read, "Keep your time, don't give it away." For the first time I understood. It wasn't just about time, it was about worth. On the flight back to Colorado, I stared at my bank app. My automatic payment to my parents was scheduled for the 10th of each month. My thumb hovered, then pressed. Cancelled. They said I was worth nothing. Let's see what happens without me. The moment the plane touched down, I got a text from Sloan. "Don't do anything stupid. Mom and Dad are watching." She didn't mean it as a warning. She meant it as control. Back in Aurora, I stepped into the small one-bedroom apartment I'd been renting for 5 years. The hallway light flickered, the radiator hissed, and the window still leaked cold air. Nothing changed except me. I went back to my routines, up at 5 long shifts at the plant, evenings spent too tired to think. But now every task felt like it echoed with the insult 50 cents. That was how they'd chosen to see me. After everything. On Saturday, I pulled on my orange safety vest and headed to the construction site where I worked weekends. I needed those shifts to make up the $4,000 a month I had been sending. I'd taken extra certifications, skipped vacations, lived off instant ramen, and budgeted down to the cent. I did it not because I was rich. I did it because I wanted to believe that being good would buy me a seat at their table. Instead, it bought me a ticket to humiliation. Back home that night, I sat at my desk with 2 things in front of me, my grandfather's pocket watch and my banking records. I pulled up every transaction labeled under Rain and compared them to the account I used to send money. The 0.50 cent charge, the one they printed out and threw in my face, stood out. It didn't come from my bank. It came from a payment app I hadn't touched in years. I dug deeper and found that it was linked to a secondary email address I barely remembered, one that Sloan once helped me set up. My chest tightened. It wasn't a mistake. It was staged. I scrolled back through old messages. Months ago, when Sloan pitched the idea of using Rain, she'd offered to handle the logistics. "Just give me access so I can make sure it looks right," she said. "It'll be our secret." I trusted her. She was my sister. But she'd used that access to send a single transaction under my name, just enough to flip the narrative, make me look like I was mocking them. I called the bank, asked about the origin of the 0.50 charge. The rep confirmed it came from a different device than mine. I didn't need them to say the name. I knew. Sunday morning, I stood at the construction site, wind howling through the steel beams, knuckles split from the cold. I'd put myself through this. For them. And now they thought I was worth a quarter of a candy bar. I stared at my hands. These hands that had fed them, sacrificed for them. The irony wasn't that they believed I sent 50 cents. The irony was that even when I gave everything, they never looked at me the way they looked at her. I got home late that night, stripped off my boots, and sat in the dark. The pocket watch ticked beside me like a metronome of shame. I made a list. 1. Find out if Sloan ever used the name Rain professionally. 2. Look into what my parents actually needed the money for. They weren't broke. Were they just comfortable using me? 3. Don't send another cent, no matter what. At midnight, an email pinged on my phone. New device accessed your account. Not me. Someone was watching me, trying to see what I'd do next. I didn't need a name on the IP address. I already knew who it was. The day the automatic payment would have gone through, my phone didn't stop vibrating. It buzzed through breakfast, through my walk to work, and through every break I took on the factory floor. Missed calls stacked like dominoes. Mom, Dad, Sloan. Messages flooded in. How could you do this to your family? We counted on you. You ungrateful, selfish boy. From Sloan Pickup. Don't make this worse. The pressure wasn't grief. It was panic. And it told me everything I needed to know. If Sloan had really been the one sending the money, my silence wouldn't have triggered a 3-alarm fire. That night, I messaged Harper Lynn. She was the kind of person who never trusted anything without receipts. We'd been tight since high school, though she'd moved to Denver and built a reputation as someone who could dissect the truth with surgical precision. I told her everything over ramen, every shameful detail. How I grew up playing backup to Sloane's spotlight. How I started sending money because I believed I owed them for existing. How I never said no even when it hurt. How they took my name and smeared it with 50 cents. How they propped up a lie so tightly that even I began to question my memory. Harper didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't pat my hand or tell me family is complicated. She leaned back, arms crossed, and asked 3 questions. Why did your parents need $4,000 a month when they still have income? Why didn't they ask you anything before accusing you? And why are they so ready to believe a fake name over their own son? We spent the next few days pulling threads. Harper started where people hide the least public behavior. I gave her everything I had. Old messages, screenshots of family group chats, bank statements I'd saved out of habit. Harper didn't comb through them like a detective. She audited them like a systems analyst. Her logic was clean and ruthless. If someone's in real debt, they talk in numbers. Installments, due dates, interest rates. Your parents, they talk like they're owed tribute. I tried to argue. She cut me off. If someone's suffering financially, they cut back. Your mom is showing off a handbag that costs half your paycheck. The pieces started to line up like a jigsaw puzzle flipped right side up. Photos of luxury purchases that aligned with my transfer history. Facebook check-ins from my dad at a local betting lounge. Posts from Sloane laughing about how her big bro always had her back. They weren't hiding. They just never expected me to look. Then Harper hit me with the worst part. Did your family ever mention a college fund or inheritance from your grandfather? I hesitated. He had money, I think. There was talk of an old life insurance payout or something after he passed, but it was vague, and I never saw any of it. Harper stared at me for a beat, then nodded. If they got that money and funneled it all into Sloane's education, her lifestyle, whatever, then they're not repaying any debt. They just chose who got to live well, and now they're asking you to keep the engine running. Something cracked open inside me. Not rage clarity. The $4,000 I sent every month wasn't some noble act of gratitude. It was a silent ransom for a role I was never allowed to audition for. I was funding the illusion that they were still a proud, stable family. I remembered sitting on that couch during the family meeting trying to say that's actually me and being told to shut up. My dad didn't want the truth. He wanted the story. The one where Sloane succeeded, and I owed them my penance for being the disappointment. Harper didn't let me drift into self-pity. She asked what I wanted to do. Keep letting them narrate your life or draw a line. I told her I wasn't sending another cent. But I also knew the calls and texts were just the beginning. When I got home, I changed the secondary lock. I ran diagnostics on the security camera outside my door. I backed up every bank record and message into cloud folders. And for the first time in years, I considered changing my phone number. Not to hide, but to draw a line they couldn't step over without breaking it. That night, while I lay on the couch, I got a message from my mother. It was short and chilling. Your father and I will be visiting this weekend. We need to talk in person. Not a question, not a request, a declaration. I stared at the screen, cold dread blooming in my chest. They weren't done with me. They were coming. I spent the next 2 days in prep mode. Not emotionally, there was no preparing for that. I mean logistically. I updated my building manager, told security not to buzz up unfamiliar guests. I saved everything, screenshots, timestamps, call logs. I even wrote out a timeline just in case, because I knew what was coming wasn't a visit. It was a siege. Saturday morning, the knock came. Not a buzz, just a steady pounding. I opened the door to see all 3 of them, Mom, Dad, Sloane. They stood like they owned the place. No greeting, no apology. Just Mom stepping inside like it was still my childhood home. We've been up all night worrying, she began with a voice more rehearsed than genuine. Dad followed, already angry. You embarrassed us. You turned your back on your family. He launched into a monologue about duty, about shame, about how I was letting jealousy ruin everything. I glanced at Sloane, who sat on the arm of the couch like a guest of honor. She stayed quiet, letting the noise swirl around her until she dropped in a line so cleanly cruel it stunned me. No one made you stop. You chose this. They cornered me in my own living room, demanded I sit, demanded I listen. demanded I fix it. Mom said, "You think 50 cents is a joke." It humiliated us. Dad laid down a payment plan like I was some debtor under his thumb. "You owe us 2 months. That's $8,000. Today." He pointed at my phone. "Open your banking app. Set it back up. Now." I didn't move. That's when Mom made her mistake. In the chaos, she referred to my secondary account by name, one I never mentioned out loud to her, a nickname only Sloan ever heard me use. That was the slip. That was confirmation. Sloan had told them everything. The money pipeline, the schedule, the name Rain. She'd scripted it all, fed it to them in pieces, made herself the hero without lifting a finger. And they believed it because it was easier than believing in me. When I didn't comply, Sloan finally spoke with her soft, careful voice. She brought up something I said years ago, something like, "If I'm ever in a place where I can help, I will." She twisted it into a lifelong contract. "You promised Zephyr. You said you'd take care of us." No, I didn't. I said I would help when I could. And I did. Over and over. But help given freely isn't a lease agreement. Then Dad changed tactics. He got quiet cold. "If you don't pay, we can start talking about how you've been living out here. What you've really been doing. People might want to hear it." I didn't have to ask what he meant. It was a veiled threat, one meant to scare me into submission. They weren't just after my money. They wanted the leverage to keep me under their thumb, even from 2 states away. I asked them to leave. Calmly, respectfully. That's when Dad raised his voice in the hallway. Loud enough for neighbors to hear. "You abandon your parents and expect us to stay quiet," Mom cried on cue. "He won't even feed his own mother." She sobbed right as someone walked past. It was all so theatrical I could barely breathe. I felt my own walls folding in around me, the safe space I built becoming a stage for their performance. Before they left, Mom added a final blow. "Maybe your boss would like to know the kind of person you are. Maybe they'd understand why someone like you shouldn't be trusted." She was no longer asking for money. She was threatening my job, my life, my name. After the door closed behind them, I stood frozen. Then I locked every bolt. I saved every video, every text. I labeled the files. I drew a boundary, not just emotional, but digital, legal, physical. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was their enemy. And enemies document everything. That night, a new number called me. I let it ring out. Then the voicemail came. "Hi, this is a verification call regarding an application for a loan in your name. Please call us back to confirm." I never applied for a loan. But I knew who had my info. I knew who left my apartment just hours before. And I knew without a doubt the fight was just beginning. The next morning I called the number back, half expecting it to go straight to voicemail or some scammy robocall prompt. Instead, a professional voice answered crisp and clear, identifying themselves as a representative from a consumer finance service I'd never heard of. They said they needed to verify some details for a pending application for a personal loan under my name. My stomach tightened. I asked them to email me the information, and when it arrived, my jaw clenched at the address they used: my childhood home in Asheville, North Carolina. A house I hadn't lived in for nearly a decade. The phone number on the application was an old one, a burner line I used years ago, long forgotten. There was no way this was an innocent error. This was someone who knew my past like it was their own. And only one group had access to that. I forwarded the email to Harper and sent a quick message: emergency. Tonight, that evening, we met at her apartment. She'd already opened her laptop and had a spreadsheet started. She didn't waste time. "We're going to break this down like a forensic audit," she said. We started with the credit report. A fresh inquiry had hit within the last 48 hours, coming from the same loan company. Harper's fingers flew over the keyboard as she set up fraud alerts with all 3 major credit bureaus, locking down my reports so nothing else could sneak through. We made a list of everything: every email address, old security questions, login hints, previous banks I'd used. When I mentioned a secondary bank I had only ever told Sloan about, Harper paused. "She knows where you kept the money, doesn't she?" I nodded. That wasn't a guess anymore. It was a fact. Harper dug deeper. "I think they're not just trying to punish you," she said. "They're trying to shift something toxic into your name." I stared at the screen. The $0.50 transaction, the ghost sender name Rain, the perfectly timed character assassination, it all made sense. They were building a parallel version of me, one where I was petty, cruel, and cheap. Meanwhile, Sloan got to play the martyr who gave until it hurt. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. My father's name lit up the screen. "I'm going to give you one last chance to make things right," he said when I picked up. "We can still fix this. Just send the money and stop making things harder than they have to be." He paused, then added, "Because if you don't, I will make sure everyone knows who you really are." He hung up. Seconds later, another text came in, this time from my mother. "We didn't raise you to be this cold. You want us to die from stress." Then Sloan, "I'm the one cleaning up your mess." "You made me look like a liar," I snapped, not in the yelling kind of way. Something colder. I sat down, typed out a message, and sent it to all three of them. "No more money. All communication must be in writing. Do not show up at my home again. This is your only warning." Then I went through every app, changed every password, deleted every recovery method tied to my old life. I replaced email addresses, disabled old phone numbers, scrubbed everything. That night, Sloan sent one more message. "You think that's going to stop us? I know which bank you used. I know everything." And with that, I knew it wasn't desperation. It was control. They didn't want help. They wanted ownership. Harper closed her laptop. "They're not done," she said. I know, I answered. But neither am I. That night, just as I started to feel a flicker of calm, an email popped up from HR. Subject: quick conversation tomorrow. Body: "Hey Zephyr, someone called today with concerns. Can we talk in the morning?" I stared at the screen for a long time. They'd hit my job. When I walked into the HR office the next morning, my heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The manager, a woman named Lisa, gestured for me to sit down. She had a notepad open but hadn't written anything yet. That made it worse. "Zephyr," she began gently, "we had a couple of calls yesterday about you. One said they were a parent, mentioned concerns about your well-being, implied you were under a lot of stress and might be acting erratically." I felt heat rise in my face, but I kept my voice calm. "And the other?" She glanced at her notes. "Someone claiming to be from a financial institution. Asked for your work schedule and location to verify employment for a loan application. It didn't feel right, so we didn't give them anything." I handed her a folder. "I think my family is trying to discredit me. I've been documenting everything." Inside were screenshots of texts, timestamps of threatening calls, and a written timeline. Lisa nodded. "We're not taking disciplinary action, but from now on we'll route all external inquiries to email. Just stay in communication with us." As I left the office, my legs felt weak. I leaned against the wall and texted Harper. Her reply came in seconds. "They're escalating because they're running out of time." That night, Harper sent me a link. "Look at this," she messaged. It was a community alert site tracking high-fee modeling workshops. One of the organizers matches someone Sloan follows. A recruiter promising casting opportunities. Entry fee in the thousands. My gut turned. I remembered overhearing Sloan on a call a few months back saying he'll cover it. He always does. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now I did. Harper's cursor blinked in our shared document. They needed cash fast. You were the fallback. I spent the weekend digging through old family records. Tucked inside a plastic file folder buried beneath tax returns was a printout of a trust document. My grandfather's estate. I wasn't sure how it had ended up with me, probably an oversight from years ago. One clause stood out. Funds to be held in trust for both grandchildren to be administered by the parents until age 25. My name was on the line. So was Sloan's. I never saw a cent. But Sloan suddenly got braces, a car, an apartment in LA when she turned 19. They hadn't been supporting us equally. They'd invested in her dream, and I was the insurance policy to keep it afloat. The next morning I saw them again. At the front of my building. Sloan was crying into her hands. My mom was pacing in front of the doors. My father was yelling something at the security guard holding up a phone. I stayed upstairs watching the camera feed. It was the same performance, but with a twist. Sloan now held up a photo, a screenshot of a $4,000 payment with the sender name Rain and blurred banking details. She cried. He lied. He only sent 50 cents. My building's security stared, confused, uncomfortable. I watched from the monitor, my jaw locked. Later that night, another ping from a credit bureau arrived, a new loan application. This one had progressed to conditional approval. Harper's message came immediately after. They're trying to cash out using your name. Everything clicked. The character assassination, the forced narrative, the fake transaction trail, the credit fraud. They weren't just attacking. They were replacing me with a version that owed them, failed them, and needed to repay them. I held my grandfather's pocket watch in my palm, feeling the weight of time. Time I'd spent working in sub-zero conditions, sending money, hoping to be seen. And now time to stop being the cushion for their bad decisions. That night, my buzzer rang. The hallway camera flicked on. My parents were there again. And Sloan. But behind them was someone new. A man in a dark coat holding a clipboard and a leather folder. At the same moment, a new text arrived. This is a verification visit regarding an outstanding financial obligation. Please be available. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at the door, knowing the next chapter would either be the one where they took everything or where I finally drew the line deep enough they couldn't cross. The knock on my door wasn't just a knock. It was a warning, a final attempt to pull me under. Through the peephole, I saw them, my parents Sloan and a man I'd never seen before in a dark wool coat holding a clipboard and wearing the kind of thin smile people use when they already think they've won. My heart didn't race this time. I didn't panic. I wasn't the same son who once flinched at the sound of my father's voice or tried to explain myself into forgiveness. I spoke through the door, firm and clear. You need to state your purpose before I open anything. The man answered, voice professional, dispassionate. I represent Everbright Finance. I'm here regarding a pending debt associated with the Maddox family. We're conducting a verification process involving linked household members. That was the setup. My parents jumped in like they'd rehearsed it. He's our son, my mom said, voice cracking just right. We need him to verify he knows everything. You're not going to leave us out here, my father barked. This concerns you. It's your responsibility. I cracked the door an inch, just enough to see to be seen. The security chain held. You're not stepping inside. If you need something, hand it over. Otherwise, this conversation ends here. The man slid a form under the door. I picked it up with a gloved hand. Do you acknowledge that you're a related party to Sloan Maddox, aka Rain? He asked like it was nothing. That name, that lie, dropped like a knife. Sloan flinched, reflexively. She looked up too fast. Lips parted, instinct kicking in before the performance could catch up. She was used to being Rain in every room except the one with our parents. Her body moved faster than her mouth could backtrack. I saw it. So did the man. I breathed once through my nose, calm. I do not acknowledge financial ties to anyone standing out there. I will not confirm or deny any connection without legal counsel present. This is harassment. You are not authorized to pursue collections at my residence. I turned to my parents. This isn't a family matter anymore. You brought someone to my door like I'm some walking ATM. We didn't want it to be like this, my mother pleaded, eyes damp. But you left us no choice. My dad stepped forward, trying to overpower the doorway. You made this mess. You lied about Sloan. You stopped paying. You're gonna sign this or you'll see what comes next. I didn't lie, I said. I sent $4,000 every month from my own account. I can prove it. You want to talk about the 50 cents? The fake name, the lies about who was actually supporting this family. Sloan turned away. She knew the room had shifted. The man from Everbright narrowed his eyes. There seems to be some disagreement on the record. We may need to follow up with formal documentation. You do that, I said. Just not here. Any future attempts at contact must go through written correspondence. You're on private property. Then I turned back to my family. I'm done being guilt-tripped, gaslit, and dragged into your chaos. You spent what I earned. You borrowed against dreams that weren't yours, and you tried to sell me as the villain in your story. My father sneered. It's all just money. In the end, it comes from the same place. No, I said. It came from me. The man from Everbright folded his folder and stepped back. Understood. We'll proceed accordingly. My mom began to cry loudly. My father cursed, trying to keep his voice low but failing. Sloan just stared at me with something between fear and hate. I will call building security if you don't leave right now, I told them. They did. Eventually, I shut the door with hands trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of someone who's just reclaimed their body after years of letting someone else pull the strings. I stared at the peephole until they disappeared from view. I sat down, picked up the pocket watch my grandfather left behind. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a son failing his family. I felt like a man who had finally told the truth out loud. That night, I got an email from Harper. She dug up the final piece of the puzzle. The casting agency Sloan had joined was flagged in multiple states for operating under false promises. They took money from families who believed their kids were destined for stardom and left them with nothing. If you're ready, she wrote, we end this. No more arguing, just action. I started the next morning like a cleanup crew walking through a demolished building. Calm, methodical, numb. Not because it didn't matter, but because it finally did. First, freeze everything. I placed a long-term fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus, locked my credit reports, changed every password, set new security questions no one in my family could guess, updated backup emails, transferred my primary banking to a new institution, then document it. I printed every transaction from the last 2 years, sorted them by date, by amount, by narrative. The $4,000 always on time, the 50-cent transfer planted like a decoy, the emails from HR, the messages threatening to call them, the photos from my hallway camera. Then I scheduled a meeting with HR, sat in that bland office with my folder of shame, and for the first time handed it over without flinching. I want to make sure this doesn't affect my work, I said. The manager nodded. Thank you for coming forward. We'll flag any external contact. You're protected here. Protected. I never knew how much I needed to hear that word until it left someone else's mouth. I left that meeting with my spine a little straighter. Next, close the story. I mailed a notarized letter to Everbright Finance stating I had no association with the debt or any parties involved. I attached a summary of harassment and demanded they cease contact under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. I copied a lawyer friend from Harper's circle just in case. Then block. I sent one final message to my family. I am not responsible for your debt. I will not co-sign, intervene, or offer financial assistance. Any further contact will be documented and treated as harassment. Do not reach out again. I saved it. Then I blocked every number, every email, every handle. A week later, I heard from Harper. They tried to borrow more, got denied. Your dad's trying to sell the house in Asheville. Within a month, it was gone. My parents moved into a cramped apartment near one of the old factory routes. My dad picked up day labor. My mom started temping at a check-in desk for a gym chain. Sloan No Rain burned her last bridge at the bar she worked at after someone exposed her for stiffing rent. She messaged me once from an anonymous account. All I ever wanted was to matter. I didn't reply. I'd learned that not every story needs a response. Instead, I poured myself into work. I got promoted to team lead. I moved into a better place closer to the plant. I painted my kitchen blue, bought a real bed frame, and stopped apologizing for the quiet. One Friday, I bought myself a decent dinner and ate it in silence. Not because I was lonely, because it was mine. 5 years passed. I flew to Savannah, Georgia for Harper's wedding. She looked radiant. The whole ceremony was small and unforced, love without debt, promises without obligation. I met someone there, Kellen Ward, architect, dry humor, clear eyes. We talked over bourbon about building things that last. As we said goodbye, Harper hugged me tight. You took your time back, she whispered. On the flight home, I opened the pocket watch. It ticked steady and small. I used to think I had to earn peace. Now I know I just had to stop letting it be stolen. I once was called Rain. I once was worth 50 cents. I once gave away $4,000 a month to people who saw it as tribute, not love. And I once believed that being the good son meant disappearing. Not anymore. I don't need their approval. I just need my life to be mine. Looking back, I don't regret giving. I regret not knowing when to stop. I regret thinking love meant silent sacrifice and making myself small so others could feel big. But this telling the truth, naming the pain, choosing peace over guilt, this was the real act of love. For myself. For the life I get to rebuild. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like your worth was measured by what you gave, I want you to know you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to say no. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. I learned that the hard way. But I'm still here healing one day at a time. If this story meant something to you, if you saw a piece of yourself in it, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me keep telling stories that matter. Drop a comment, let me know you're here. You're not alone. Thank you for listening.